Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor Zachrin. I'm the Associate Curator for Highline Art and pleased to have worked with Frank to commission this work, which is the first co-commission by Highline Art and Chanel Culture Fund. And we're just thrilled to be here to see the work all together and thrilled to have some of our amazing friends from Chanel Culture Fund here with us. And we're so grateful for their support. And we are working together next year as well to commission a new work. Frank and I were talking earlier, and he mentioned that he also wanted to say a few words, but first, obviously, want to introduce the amazing artist behind the video we just watched, WANG Yefeng.
Thank you. I guess I just want to open up. Thanks for being here, first of all, everyone. And I want to open up this conversation by just saying how happy and how amazing this collaboration has been. So with the support of Highline Art and Chanel Culture Fund, I was able to basically living in a perfect artist's life in the past 3 months. You know, editing in my dark studio and glued to the screen. Sorry to all my friends who I haven't been showing up much, you know, but you see what I've been working on. So the amazing curator Taylor Zachrin, it's an honor to work with you. If I would do this again in a heartbeat, you know. I also want to thank Christiana Paul, who is the curator of the Whitney Museum, who played a very important role in making this happen. To all my wonderful collaborators, who some of them are actually here tonight. So I want to thank Amy Lane for working. I have my notes here, so bear with me. Thanks for Amy Lane for working on the Chinese text, and my curator friend Natasha Chuk, curator friend Natasha Chuk, who worked on polishing the English translation. I think I called you like last minute, and you were like, yeah, let's do this. So thank you. I've got Anna Run and David Liu here, who were actually my previous students at NYU. Both of them worked on the animation part with me, and both of them are becoming very promising artists themselves too. So my concern now is just that they are gonna get very expensive to work on the next project with me now. You know, in the film, also you can see a lot of we pushed the color grading pretty far. That's due to the work with KKKP Studio they are a professional video production studio in Seoul, Korea, and it's run by my friend Calvin Park, who is an amazing filmmaker himself too. A lot of footages were actually taken in the Zampo Museum in Nangqian. So I had a residency there in May. So the people there were so helpful in terms of filming stuff. You know, they were able to actually bring me to these secret places that are not accessible to a normal tourist. So it's wonderful. Last but not least, Frank Kalberg was the amazing musician here who composed the sound. Thank you. Originally from Finland, now based in New York. This is not the first time we collaborate, and it certainly won't be the last time. What I can say, I mean, he's like my Hans Zimmer now, you know. Yeah, go to his concert. You won't regret it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you.
So just to kick off, you know, we talked a lot about how you live between New York and Shanghai, and these two very distinct environments and the experience of moving between them has really impacted your work, both like your visual language throughout your practice, but also particularly Groundless Flower Art, which we just watched. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that experience and why that has such a strong impact on your work.
Like living in both places and traveling. Yeah. So like as Taylor said, I have been going back, and I still go back like maybe once, twice, or 3 times a year. So I actually came here 15 years ago from Shanghai for my master's degree at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And after that, I went to Providence working as a tenured professor for 10 years. And it was in actually 2022, I finally decided to quit my job. Well, that made my mom really unhappy for sure, but just moved to New York City. As you know, I really like the city, so it was kind of like a no-brainer to just move here. But I think since, no matter where I was for the past, no matter how many years, I kept this really consistent pace of moving back and forth. And I just started getting very comfortable with this rhythm of constant, global traveling. And there are two places I feel very comfortable if you put me in. The first place is my driver's seat in my car, and the second place is actually the cabin of a long-haul flight. The longer, the better. Excuse me. But it's obviously it's not a stable kind of life, right? It has a lot of challenges. I don't have any family of my kinship in the U.S., so I have to learn to deal with everything and solve all the problems by myself. And hence the sense of solitude and groundlessness is always at work. It's like a daily experience. But I think the transformative moment was when I actually realizing that it will probably just be a forever experience, being a nomad and being groundlessness. And I understand that home is just never a physical location, right? And that was like the moment I really just started embracing my identity as an in-betweener in this nomadic way of life. Which actually allowed me to really open up and start seeing endless possibilities to make connections to new places, new people, and new things. And in the larger picture, I feel like we are probably just all accidental travelers thrown into this world, pretending to know what we are doing. Just as like when I was filming the thing in the Gobi Desert and was deeply lost, couldn't find my way, and it was still filming, So I think these contemplations were in the film, and how one can take in an unfamiliar place, how one can actually take this upon as a precious opportunity to sort of establish a new kind of subjectivity by passing all of the identities and histories and ideologies written for them,
So actually on that note of identity, because something we also talked about was by virtue of being a nomad, there is this sense of instability of identity by being this in-betweener. And the imagery really reflects that, the landscapes reflect that, the places that you've chosen to display in the work reflect that. So I'm sort of curious, specifically imagery-wise, the groundless flower, the cosmic tree, both floating and sort of have this weightlessness to them. Can you talk about specifically the desert imagery, the places you've shot, those two figures in the work, and how those speak to this nomadism, the in-betweenism?
Yeah. I love talking about this flower, actually, because as you can see, it's a recurring motif. And what you didn't get to see here is the first episode of this body of work, which is titled Groundless Flower Prologue. We showed it in Shanghai earlier this year and Hong Kong. And the flower was also there. So I guess, there is this paradox that I'm constantly working in this body of work. Just to think about it, how can a flower be groundless? It's kind of against the logic. How can a plant be groundless and still survive? So in a way, it's just a metaphor for me as a person too. And there's actually an interesting story about what inspired this flower. I don't know if you want to hear it.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. We want to hear it. Tell us.
Yeah, so it was really accidental too, because I was driving my car. I had this solo trip 2 years ago, filming stuff in the Gobi Desert in Gansu province in China, the no man's land, so-called. And before you enter into that no man's land, the desert, you need to actually drive through a city. It's filled up with these yellow, I think it's the rapeseed flowers. They have these rapeseed flower fields, so the whole city is yellow. And that city is quite famous for these flowers. And you left the city and you get deeper into the desert, all of a sudden nothing. So no tree, no sign of life, just barren land. And I got lost. So I just kept on walking. And then I think all of a sudden there was a voice, you know, I don't know if it was like me talking to myself or it made me realize that maybe my task in the Gobi Desert, in the no man's land, was trying to find a flower in the barren land where no plants can survive. So as a hiker, I understand that I probably would never find it, but at the same time, I feel like I probably have already found it. Does that make sense at all?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess what that flower can be is maybe, you know, the meditation every viewers you can really come up with your own conclusion.
And then on that, you know, the video includes all this organic imagery, the flower, the cosmic tree, but there's also, you know, all of these digital apparitions and these really digital landscapes, these really sort of otherworldly landscapes. Can you talk a little bit and walk us through that fusion, the sort of combination of the digital and the organic?
Yeah, so I do work with both digital and tangible materials. I actually came from a sculptural background, but I do, you know, do a lot of video and animation and film. I think the way I engage these media nowadays is to actually, I start with the mindset of looking at the digital not as an opposite to the nature or the organic. You know, if you think about this huge, there's like a vast landscape behind the interface, right? And there are a lot of things unknown, you know, hidden there, and you can take it as your playground and you can experiment. You know, so I guess the way I deal with it is just to turn it into like a really intimate playground, and I can start filling it in with my characters, with my drawing fragments, painting fragments, and you know, make that become their habitat. You know, so that's kind of like the way I think about how I approach digital space now.
And on that, the production process more generally, because the work includes so many different media and so many different art forms, can you walk us through sort of what we just watched, like what really has gone into this work?
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy film, right? I don't know, you guys were like, what the hell did I just watch? But the beginning of this process, you know, I'm talking about the production process, it began with filming, obviously. So I had to do these solo trips and going to the Gobi Desert and the best Tibet lands. I don't know if any of you have been there, and the Qinghai, right, Nangqian, which is the Tibetan Qinzhang Plateau. So I film with both my cinema camera and a DJI drone. So it provides you with two different perspectives. One is actually grounded, and the other one is actually a groundless one. You know, when you send off your drone and it flies away, I really feel like it becomes an externalized organ. It actually can bring your body to somewhere your body cannot reach. So that's very interesting. And I take all these materials and come back to my studio. And when I'm working on the film or video or animation, I don't think I'm an artist who makes rigorous storyboards. But I actually make a lot of drawings and paintings as a research, as a study, as a way of doing yoga, meditation meaning. So these drawings will actually eventually find their way into the film too. You know, I remember last year I was doing my second residency at ISCP, this amazing residency in New York. And I had a bunch of paintings there. I was preparing for my first film at the time. And then I started destroying my canvas, which probably will make my gallerist very unhappy. And then, you know, I digitized them, I turned them into sculptures. So it's a little bit like a mess.
It's an organized mess.
Yeah, an organized chaos, maybe I would say. But it's a milieu, so it's like a milieu that all these media find their unique positions in this ecosystem. Yeah, that's.
And then more about, like, I'm really interested in also the animation, and we talked a little bit about the elements that are sort of hand-drawn animation or 3D modeled, but also how algorithm plays into that. Could you explain for the group also, because I think it's a really interesting element of your practice, and it's a format that I think is sort of, in a way, quite cutting edge for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
Of course.
Yeah, but in reality, actually, it's just really the mindset as an artist and deciding how much I can control. If you are thinking about all these different material I work with video and film and sculpture and painting. They all have their characteristics, right? And in a way, I think to this day, video is still one of the most difficult media, but I absolutely love doing it. And painting is, like I said, doing yoga. Doesn't mean it's easy. It's actually very difficult, but it's actually I think it's still one of the most accessible media. The algorithm itself in this video you are seeing comes with a lot of unpredictability. Because when I'm animating, say, the tree and the flower, its natural swinging is not made by precise keyframing. Meaning I didn't have like a keyframe at this time and that time, and you connect these two keyframes, the motion is generated, right? That's like the traditional way of making an animation, no matter 2D or 3D. But very often I actually use this algorithm built in the system, in the 3D modeling and animation program called a dynamic simulation. So it is capable of simulating physics, like gravity or wind blowing, things like that. A piece of cloth, and I just insert a bunch of parameters basically and let it do the generation. So it comes with a lot of unknown results. Sometimes it breaks the system and give you like a lot of glitch, but I just try to work with that more and more and embrace this unknownness and give away a bunch of responsibility or power to the machine.
So from a content perspective, because I want to go back to the work and frankly even the title itself, which includes this Tibetan word ah. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and how that is relevant and related to the work?
Right, yeah. I absolutely like talking about this word too, actually. The title is, as I said, in May, I was in Nanqian, right, at Zampo Museum, invited to this residency program. And that was a great inspiration. So a little bit background of this museum, if I can. It's actually built by, it's in the area of the Qinghai, like I said, the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau. And it's built by the 9th Chakmei Rinpoche, yeah. So he is considered as one of the Tibetan Buddhism living Buddha. But he is also actually a professional filmmaker himself. So he established that contemporary art museum right next to a Buddhist academy. And they ran these programs, and I went there. So, of course, you will be like meditating, hiking, playing with the monks there in the Buddhist academy, and we started chatting, and I actually started picking up some Tibetan words. This word "ah" I noticed it was the first word he taught me. And in Tibetan word, this letter means the beginning of everything. It pronounces as "ah." If you try to make that voice yourself, you will notice it's one of the most primordial vowel. You don't need to decorate it with your teeth or your tongue. You don't need to move anything in your mouth. You just make a voice like "ah." It's the first voice a baby will make when it's born, and it's the last voice you will make when you die. You'll be like, "Ah, I'm dead," right? So that became very interesting, and then I started doing a little bit of research of the genealogy of this word. Obviously, in Sanskrit, its etymology, this word can also be a prefix, meaning a form of negation. So like doing something, which become even more interesting because you see this connection with nothingness, right? And the nothingness leads to everything. The ultimate void leads to the ultimate productivity. Hence, the beginning of everything. And that idea just fit the concept of this film really well, and that's why we just decided, okay, yeah, that's gonna be in the title. Yeah.
So back to the Tibetan Plateau, to the Gobi Desert, can you take us through what these locations mean to you, why they have come to really represent this idea of the placelessness, the liminality, the beginning of everything, and also the end of everything in a way.
Yeah, for sure. So there were several sites you saw in this film, including the Gobi Desert, like I said, the Basti Badlands in New Mexico. Have anyone been to the Basti Badlands? It's amazing, and has nothing. And also filmed in the Qinzhang Plateau, right? It was just amazing that, because I'm an urban kid, and if you're an urban kid, the first encounter of this kind of place, it's a jaw-dropping experience, right? You'll be overwhelmed, feeling you are so small in the environment. But very quickly, being there makes you learn so much about it as well. So I remember being in the Basti Badland filming. It just looks like inside of a vast carcass of a dead animal. And it's just hard to believe this kind of plot can exist on the earth, It's like the dead body of the earth. But then a carcass actually means it was alive, right? And because death actually makes us understanding being alive better. And then all these notions you read in the book, such as deep time, deep listening, they are just no longer philosophical ideas or concepts anymore. Another example is when you stand in front of a huge rock sculpted by the wind erosion in the Gobi Desert. You can clearly see how much time it takes to make that happen. Yeah, so these are some great experience and inspirations I got there. But on the other hand, so I was filming and I took these footages back. Then very quickly, I also realized that I was trying not to overly romanticize these things, or these places, or the so-called wasteland aesthetics, as there's actually has been a long tradition of romanticizing this kind of environment in the Western literature or film. If you think about a film like Dune, Yeah, so I think there is this push and pull relationship with this material I work with.
And even that push and pull, and what you were saying before about how by seeing the carcass, it also indicates that there was life. That type of binary, we've also talked a lot about and is really evident in the work. There's the binaries, of course, between East and West, which you've talked about as a through line for your practice, but also human and non-human, the digital and organic. And you challenge these binaries. And we talked also about how the cosmic tree almost creates this removal of those types of binaries and that type of linear hierarchy. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that element, why I'm challenging these binaries as binaries is important to your work.
Right. So let me ask you a question. Is it obvious in the film, this challenge of the...
I mean, I think it is, but also, to be fair, I've seen the work 40 times, so I've had a lot of time with it. So we could ask the group maybe, but I think, at the very least throughout your practice as well, that the binaries are there.
Yeah, I'm just really curious because I myself probably have been watching this for 100 times, and making it too. Was it conscious? Was it not? I don't know, but because in my daily life, actually, the way to not think about things in a binary way is not just a proposition in theory. It's actually a necessity that in real life, right? As somebody being groundless in an unfamiliar environment, every time I go back home, which is Shanghai now, it really no longer feel like going back home anymore. New York is my current base and habitat, and I probably will forever remain a stranger here in an interesting way, So I think this feeling of being here and there at the same time, or not being here and there at the same time, is just a natural experience, So I think it's quite natural, actually. It shapes the way I think about the things and also approach things. Yeah, and make connections to everything too.
Something else that we talked about, the characters in your work and the figures in your work and the masks in your work. And also throughout your practice, there are a lot of these whimsical, almost playful looking characters. Can you explain a little bit both the background for the genesis of those types of characters in your work, but also maybe some of the masks and the people that we see in Groundless Flower?
Do we have another 30 minutes?
We don't, no.
Okay, I will try to give you some context. Well, first of all, I always work with characters, and it was, I think, up until pretty late, I realized that the reason why I do love making these characters was, well, partially one of the reason, an important reason actually, because I was an only child. And growing up, you know, I remember my parents will go off to work and left myself at home, you know, so in order to keep me out of trouble, so basically they just give me a lot of toys, you know, and surround me inside of the toys, and Lego, blah, blah, blah. So that became a very early memory, and I always interact with these toys. Sometimes I break them or they open to try to kind of, you know, see if there's like a spirit inside of these toys or a character, and I started rebuilding them, you know, started inventing my own characters. And that was a kind of like a really early stage ontological exploration as a kid, I guess. And maybe today I remained the kid I was.
I think you could make the argument that as an artist, you're effectively like the toy maker now. You're
Right.
inventing these imaginary worlds.
Yeah. Well, I can also, I agree. Yeah. And I can maybe give a little bit context of some of the characters in this film. There is this big red monster at the beginning, you remember, and that's actually the reference of Pangu, which is a very early, actually one of the first, I would say, creator god image in the Chinese mythology. So its story was it actually basically opened up the universe, and after it's dead, its body dissolved and turned into everything we have in this world. You know, its hair turned into the trees, and its body flesh turned into the mountains and rocks, and its blood turned into the river. But here, when I'm making this image, this character, referencing it, at the same time also reinventing it, I was also taking a bunch of reference from you remember this image of the Satan in Dante's Inferno, the three-headed Satan, right? And at the same time, you know, blended in with a little bit image of the Vajra, you know, this Buddhism statue in Tibet. You know, so all these different cultures and mythologies are blended together, and that's basically an attempt of not looking at all these mythologies as relics, but try to, you know, put them together and try to build some new kinds of connections. And then there's the worm people, there's a tree. I'm sorry, I can go on and on about it.
So the last question I'll ask selfishly before we open it up to audience questions is really just about the context here. You know, the work and having it on the High Line, which is, you know, this former rail line, this infrastructure reuse project, and now is this, you know, green oasis in the middle of the city. Can you talk a little bit about the presence of the work in this location and also the presence of the work in a full public space?
Right. That's actually a really good question. At the beginning of the creative process, the answer was no, you know, so it didn't really have, as a creative process at first is an internal, you know, it's like a journey inward, right? So I actually couldn't think too much about how the viewers will take it, will they understand it when they encounter the film on High Line in a public setting. The other day I was sitting here and I saw some random viewers watching the film like twice, and then they just ran to the sign over there and trying to figure out what the hell they just watched, you know? Yeah, but I think we do intersect in at a very important point where, you know, we try to transform these relics and renew it and try to build some kind of new imaginations. Just as if how I was using a bunch of references from mythologies, different mythologies, right? Like these masks, the worm people masks, they are from, you know, Tibetan Buddhism, they are from Cambodia Buddhism, they are from Sanxingdui. So it's all blended together. Yeah, and that's also just another way for me to kind of like make new connectivities, with all these things blended together.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So we can take a few audience questions. I think we have time for 3, 4. We'll see how long they take. But if anyone has any questions for Frank, this is an excellent time. Nobody?
They don't know what they would watch.
Or they're shy?
Thank you. Hi, Frank. Hi, Taylor. That was really insightful. Thank you so much. Frank, you had mentioned this was actually part of a series, that there was Groundless prologue, and this was Ah. I just wanted to ask, and for the audience to understand, what is the difference between the two? And then if you are planning the next version of Groundless, and what would that be?
Right. Thanks, Aaron, for the question. We also sort of perceived the process of the making of this project. So, thanks for your help, during the whole process. And secretly, I sort of have this like 5, maybe 6 years of plan for this body of work, including filming in a bunch of different locations. And but the engagement of the very original idea, I sort of have this idea to myself. The first episode of the Groundless Flower prologue, it engaged the idea of space. Because it's inspired by this very extreme life experience of getting lost and almost got killed in the Gobi Desert, right? One just kept on walking. What do you think about what you can do? If you are lost in the desert, my only suggestion to you is just to keep on walking. Because if you keep walking, you are not lost, So the walking is sort of like, it means the absence of a final destination, right? So one is always going. But at the same time, you are in this vast, landscape makes you so disoriented. Yeah, well, in that case, actually, the drone didn't really help because, you couldn't really find any landscape. All the sand dunes looks exactly the same. So that was that. And this new one, I started thinking a lot about time, I started thinking about, actually, in a way, the true meaning of creativity, and the retention of it. And obviously, the time was not being perceived in a linear fashion in this film, right? So, yeah, did that answer the question, Aaron? Wait for the third one.
We're bringing you a microphone.
Yeah, thanks. This is a great film.
Thank you.
Just wanting to know more about the music and the collaboration there. And then specifically, since you talked about dynamic simulations and how your sculptural forms are generative and subjective to some other system, was the music also generative in some way, and what was that discussion like?
Yeah, the collaboration, I will say that, so Frank is actually said, maybe you want to say something about the music? Do you? I don't want to impose, I'm sorry. I can actually start by saying how we started collaborating, if that helps. Yeah, because the actual process of making is just like a lot of trust, right? And a lot of, because I believe in what Frank is capable of doing, so he's actually the part in the collaboration that I worry about the least. But we actually started collaborating because we both went to this residency program, this fellowship in New Hampshire called MacDowell, and that's where we first met. And I had an open studio in my studio one night. I put up some really weird work. I think there was like, it was a work with a little bit appropriation of the characters in the Raised by the Wolves series. This HBO post-apocalyptic series?
I don't know it, but I'll look it up.
It was really good, but it got discontinued, because I guess, it's somehow too profound to be played on TV. So Frank came and he saw the work, and we talked a little bit about it. I had a very bad soundtrack. I think I just basically downloaded a soundtrack from Kurt Stanzel, which was his soundtrack for the original Dune film, which was never made by Jodorowsky. So I played it on YouTube in the background. Frank saw the film, and then he went back. And the second morning, in my email box, I saw 3 sound clips just sent by this guy. And in the email, one sentence, he said, "Frank, try this." And I overlaid it onto my video, and it worked perfectly. So that's how it began. Yeah. But there was like a lot of creative freedom, I think, and mutual respect when we worked together, just as how Highline, gave me total creative freedom to thank you for that. We do talk quite, at the beginning, we do quite talk a lot about the concept and what the film is about. But I don't think I really, I had like too much expectation of how the sound should just sound like, right? I just send a file to you and, it's your job now. Yeah, I love this way of working, and I'm glad so far it has been working really well.
And I'll just add that, an interesting thing about this space is obviously it's very non-traditional. So the 2 Franks also came here for a site visit, and we spent a good amount of time listening to the work and figuring out how really to play with the volume and the different levels to make it work in this space, where you could hear it from down the park, but it also sort of felt really atmospheric in this space when you're standing here. And so the collaboration continued well beyond the final production of the work.
Right.
I think we have time maybe for one more question, if there are any.
Can you talk a little bit about your approach and editing process? And I know you work with a lot of paintings and images and characters, and I'm interested in knowing how do you do the selection, the order, the editing, and then how does that translate to the other collaborators, I guess, or the animators?
Yeah, I remember that was also in your original question. We didn't get to ask, So great question.
Perfect.
Thanks, Carlos. So like I said, all the media is definitely in the milieu for me. In my studio, it's like a convergence where all these media meet. I actually remember seeing this great show of Thomas Schutter last year at MoMA. I remember reading like this curatorial statement on the wall. It says, for Thomas Schutter, there is no hierarchy to any media. And I was like, yeah, that really resonates, that I can agree with it more. That's also really the way I work. And in my studio, I basically treat all the media equally, right? It's a little bit like people. So each media has their own personality to begin with, but very quickly, their unique personalities started sneaking into each other, along with like the unraveling of a bigger project. So that's really just how I feel, right? And sometimes it just happens, they find the right moment to come in.
Like the paper cutouts behind the figures and
yeah. Yeah, because they actually, I do these things concurrently, So like I said, I'm not somebody who has very rigorous storyboard, and when I'm editing a film and the editing screen becomes unbearable, I stand up and, go to paint. And the sculpture is just natural to me because my BFA was in sculpture, but it actually did really help me to understand, I was able to grasp the virtual 3D space very quickly. Because I could actually, through that flat interface, I was able to understand the X, Y, Z, the 3 axes and the depth and the volume well in a virtual 3D space. So that helped. And very often nowadays, I actually think a video work is like both an assemblage. At the same time, a video work can be like a moving image sculpture,
Great. Thank you all so much. We're so grateful, and have a great evening. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, everyone.
Thank you, Tyler.